Malibu Moon is a horse you can believe in. The reason I love Malibu Moon is that he has produced winners and stakes winners at every level. In our opinion, the best stallion in Kentucky was AP Indy, and he is AP Indy's best son at stud.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the DRF Breeding Report. I'm Dan Illman, always pleased to be talking pedigree with Nicole Russo, and this week we're going to talk about some major names leading up to the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby. And Nicole, we have to talk about a 3-year-old filly that exploded onto the scene, and we're going to see her here winning the Santa Anita Oaks by the length of the stretch. This is an exciting Kentucky Oaks prospect in Paradise Woods.
Right, and Paradise Woods, this is the first time we're talking about her on this show, but we've certainly talked about her sire a little bit. She's from the first crop of Union Rags, who had 2 other Grade 1 winning fillies from his first crop last year to be one of last year's leading freshman sires. He's alive on this year's Kentucky Derby trail with Patch, who ran second in the Louisiana Derby. He really seems to be a horse who's, developing these classic distance type of horses. Union Rags was a Grade 1 winner himself as a juvenile. Came on, of course, to run while longer at 3, winning the Belmont Stakes for his signature score. And really, he's thrown a lot of class in this first crop, and he could have the Kentucky Oaks favorite here in Paradise Woods.
Certainly, this horse ran a 107 Beyer speed figure, handling winners for the first time, 2 turns for the first time, without any fuss at all. You mentioned Union Rags. He stands for $50,000 at Lane's End. He has sired horses like Union Strike, as you mentioned, Grade 1 stakes winner as a 2-year-old filly. Tequilita's a graded stakes winner. And you look at the female side of Paradise Woods' family, there's some distance, there's some class.
Right. This family's sort of interesting looking at it. It seems to throw a little bit of everything. Paradise Woods is a half-sister to Forest Shatter, who's a very good turf sprinter. But then this is the female family of Street Sense, who was a juvenile champion and won the Kentucky Derby the following year. And, of course, classic type horse. So the family really sort of runs the whole spectrum. It's very interesting.
Yes, the dam and unraced half-sister to a Grade 3 stakes winner, Taja, who I think won the Arlington Handicap at 1.25 miles on the turf. So plenty of stamina there. And another big name in this immediate family is Mr. Greeley, who was a really good middle-distance horse and a nice stallion as well. So Paradise Woods is an extremely exciting prospect. And as you mentioned, could be the favorite for the Kentucky Oaks. Now, I'm not going to ask you your top selections for the Kentucky Derby just yet. We've got post positions. We've got plenty of time to finalize the field. But I did ask you to come up with 3 names of horses that would be qualified to handle the rigors of the Kentucky Derby from a surface and distance standpoint. And here are the names you came up with. We have to start talking about this topic with the 2-year-old champion, Classic Empire, who we're going to see getting back on the beam in the Arkansas Derby.
Right. Well, Classic Empire is a horse that I looked at, and I saw that he seemed to be taking on sort of the stamina and that profile of his male line while picking up the class from his female line. The female line, immediately speaking, does seem to have some distance limitations. He's a half-sibling to a couple of stakes horses, but all sprinters. The nice filly Uptown Twirl, Anytime Magic, stakes-winning sprinters. But now what balances that out is his sire line. Of course, he's by Pioneer of the Nile, really proving himself as a young classic sire. After coming out with horses like Cairo Prince, Vince Ramos, Preakness third-place finisher Social Inclusion in his first crop, sired Triple Crown winner American Pharaoh in his second crop. Pioneer of the Nile himself got all of his own wins at 1 mile or longer. He's by Belmont winner Empire Maker, who is by Derby winner and Classic Sire Unbridled. Just a really good sire line that seems to be balancing out some of those qualities on the bottom half of the page. I think Classic Empire is really well equipped for this.
I agree with you 100%. I love the mixture of stamina on top of speed in this pedigree. You mentioned all of the attributes of Pioneer of the Nile, who stands for $110,000 at WinStar. Classic Empire sold for $475,000 as a Keeneland September yearling. And you mentioned the speed in the pedigree. The second dam was a stakes-winning dirt sprinter, but Pioneer of the Nile just seems to give this horse the ability to stretch his speed and his ability to longer distances, as we saw in the Arkansas Derby. Let's move to the West Coast, and let's talk about a horse that is truly built for stamina, and that is the multiple Grade 1 winner Gormley. And we're going to take a look at Gormley gutting it out in the Santa Anita Derby.
Yeah, Gormley, the question with him was never really how far he would run or how good his genetics suggested he could be. The question was sort of what distance or what surface he would prefer. His female family has a lot of class, a lot of stamina, but it's found the majority of its success on turf. But on top, you've got Malibu Moon, who's a proven classic sire of 2013 Derby winner Orb. He's providing both the dirt ability and additional stamina. I mentioned underneath that very, very good female family. It's the family of Miss Mambo, who was classic placed in France. It's the family of Champion Astropod, who's full grow, quite long-winded. It's the family of Horse of the Year, Criminal Type. So it's a really classy family with Malibu Moon on top to, provide kind of that dirt footing. The other thing that I think is interesting about Gormley, who wants every inch of this 1.25 miles, is he's by Malibu Moon, who can get kind of a wet track horse, and these turf-type pedigrees sometimes play well on a wet track as well. So Gormley coming out from California, but I'm not going to count him out if it happens to rain on Derby weekend.
And Gormley was very, very game in winning the Sham over a wet track. You mentioned Malibu Moon. Orb, of course, won the Kentucky Derby over a wet track as well. Malibu Moon has been a very good stallion for a very long time. He stands for $75,000 at Spendthrift Farm. Spendthrift Farm is our sponsor for all Kentucky Oaks-related material here on DRF.com. And Malibu Moon has a Kentucky Oaks contender in his own right this year with Farrell, who's done some really good works in Louisiana. Gormley, a $150,000 yearling buyback. It's the Sheriffs, John Sheriffs, it's the Mosses. This horse, as you mentioned, has it all from a distance standpoint. Now let's talk about an interesting long shot from a pedigree standpoint. This horse is a phenomenal pedigree. We're going to watch IRAP win his maiden in the Bluegrass.
Well, as you mentioned, IRAP, breaking his maiden in the Bluegrass, but really looking at his pedigree, it's all sort of later developing horses. His sire Tisnow, of course, came on later in his 3-year-old year, wound up winning 2 consecutive Breeders' Cup Classics. IRAP is a half-brother to a champion sprinter in Speightstown. Speightstown came on with his championship season as a 6-year-old. So looking at the pedigree, IRAP had been knocking on the door a little bit, was graded placed already, but there might be a reason that he's starting to get good right now. Now, he's got the same sort of pedigree we talked about with Classic Empire, where it's sort of that blend of speed and stamina. Female family slanted more towards speed. Male line, very, very much a distance sire in Tisnow. Sire of Belmont winner Datara, Dubai World Cup winner Well Armed, Santa Anita Derby and Traverse winner Colonel John. A lot of long distance horses. The other thing that I think is interesting about IRAP as a Derby hopeful is that Tisnow is a big horse who sires very big horses, and IRAP, when you look at him, he's a big strapping thing, sort of goes about his own business. I really don't see him being phased in this 20-horse Derby field that's shaping up, and that's the sort of, intangible that I think is important as well.
I think that's a very good point. You've got to have that physical presence. There's a 19-horse scrimmage in the first quarter mile of the Kentucky Derby. Everybody trying to get position, a lot of bumping and bouncing around. And IRAP does have that physical presence, it seems, that he'll be willing to take a little bit of a fight and a little bit of bouncing around in some traffic. IRAP, a $140,000 Keeneland September yearling buyback, who sold for $300,000 at the OBS March 2-year-old in training sale. Tisnow stands for $60,000 at WinStar as part of a WinStar tailor-made partnership. You mentioned the stamina on top, the speed in the bottom. It seems to have melded beautifully with IRAP. So 3 horses to consider, at least for the exotics, underneath at the very least for the Kentucky Derby from a pedigree standpoint. You can follow Nicole on Twitter at DRF Russo and get all of the latest breeding news from DRF at DRF Breeding. We're creeping closer to the Kentucky Derby. We'll have lots more concerning the Run for the Roses next week on the DRF Breeding Report. We'll see you then.